Hello, hello, and welcome back to Retrieving Sanity with your podcast host Keegan, and this is your podcast for all mental health, addiction, recovery issues, and topics. And today we have a very special guest, empowerment coach Denise Day.
Hey everybody. Hey Keegan. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Of course, thank you for being on. I'm excited to have you on. I've had other empowerment coaches on before, but the thing is, we're not here to necessarily talk about professions and really to discuss like how do we fix everything or what are some things we can do. Instead, we're actually here to discuss what it's like to have to deal with a late diagnosis of a mental health disorder or illness, however you want to put it, but something that other people may know early on, a lot of people don't know till later on. And so we're here to hear your experiences with all of this because it affects someone close and dear to you. And therefore, it's something that other people need to hear because other people deal with the same thing. So,
Yeah.
What is it that really brought you to the show?
Well, when I saw an opportunity to book, with you, I'll be honest, I saw a lot with, recovery and addiction and that, which gosh knows runs in the family too. Who doesn't know, or have somebody like that. And then I thought, I have a daughter, an adult daughter, who has mental illness, and she's been misdiagnosed, and again, to nobody's fault, because they didn't know when she was younger, when she was about 11. And so I need to let people know what it's like as a mom. And I can probably share a little bit about what it's like for my daughter, because obviously she does talk to me. We do have a close relationship, and we talk about a lot of things. Because again, as we go into like 2025, there's still such a stigma with mental illness, and not just with your regular Joes, I'll say, and things like that. And the people where I live, I mean, I live in Amish country. So we live in a very tight-knit community, not a lot of diversity, not a lot of, you just know what you know, a lot of farmland and things like this. And it's just been frustrating for me that people see my daughter and other people in the community who have a variety of different mental health challenges, and with the judgmental still type of thing, and just still not understanding. And again, it's frustrating because we're coming into 2025 and we have more than enough information available to us, maybe too much information, where I really think we should be much further ahead as a society when it comes to supporting people who have, whatever mental health issues that they have. So that's why I wanted to, be on this podcast and just kind of share my story and my journey with my 27-year-old daughter.
Well, that is way too awesome. It is stories like yours that we need to help end the stigma. And like you said, it is 2025, or like closer to we're going into. But the thing is, it is frustrating having to deal with a stigma that carries this unimaginable burden sometimes that we have to face it head on. I think because otherwise it's just going to be sidestepping the issues, and we have made a lot of progress within the last 50 years. We really, really have. But that's the thing, is that it does take people speaking out about it to let everyone know, like, hey, this works, this doesn't, or maybe we need to look at everything from a different little perspective. But having that stigma really does affect literally everything from day in, day out activities to major activities. And sometimes it can strain relationships, it can strain jobs, it can strain literally anything and everything, because it's misunderstanding, it's misinformation, and it's also a lack of an understanding and um,
Yeah.
information. So,
And I was just thinking as you were just talking, and people with mental health issues,
mm-hmm,
challenges, just say, depression,
mm-hmm,
they're still each individual.
yeah,
They're individuals. So just because,
mm-hmm,
maybe I say I have depression or something like that, um, I may handle things differently than somebody else that,
mm-hmm,
has depression. And that's the other thing I try to explain to people. They're still individuals. So just
yeah,
because you may know Susie down the road who is autistic doesn't mean that she has the same behaviors or her brain works exactly the same way as
mm-hmm,
my daughter's
yeah,
and things like that. So that's also, you know,
oh yeah,
there's that stereotype still, but I also don't want people to go, okay, I understand. For example, I'm going to talk about my daughter being on the spectrum,
mm-hmm,
but don't pigeonhole people. Don't
yeah,
put all those people into the same
no,
box, especially on the spectrum, because there's a reason it's called the spectrum, right? It's like,
yeah,
ooh.
it's very
And
wide.
they're learning more and more and more.
Mm-hmm,
So it seems like it's getting longer and longer and longer.
mm-hmm,
So there's a lot of intricacies, I
yep.
think, that go into that as well.
Oh yeah, that is absolutely correct and true. Because if you start treating people like a barcode, then it's going to be not good.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, every person is their own person, and therefore, what causes one thing is not necessarily the cause for someone else, and what fixes something may not be the remedy for someone else as well. And that's a lot like recovery that I've experienced myself and I've seen in other people. What works for me works for others sometimes and not all the time, and vice
Mm-hmm.
versa. And it's sometimes trial and error. And that's one of the frustrating things about figuring out what's going on in our heads, because your daughter was misdiagnosed
Mm-hmm.
and later out finds out that is actually on the autism spectrum. And so there's a lot of frustration that goes on in there. It goes like, well, it the DSM-5 says this, this, and this, so you must have this, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, no, not necessarily, because there's these intricacies, which means no, maybe it could be related to this, and then we solve this problem, and actually this one now surfaces, and so on and so forth, and it can just be a whole muddle mess. But
Yeah.
uh,
And then bring in the life experiences,
mm-hmm,
how life has affected
mm-hmm,
each of those individuals.
yeah,
And now you're dealing with a whole heck of a lot more, a whole gamut of
mm-hmm,
things. And that's one of the things my daughter deals with, and that obviously I am dealing with too as her mom,
mm-hmm,
because the things that have happened to her,
mm-hmm,
the hurtful, terrible things that have happened to her, have affected my family terribly.
mm-hmm,
You, you know, um, she. Yeah, I'll kind of, if it's okay, I'll kind of start like with her
yeah,
her journey a little bit.
yeah, for sure, go ahead.
So again, she's 27 years old,
Okay.
and she when she was born, she started with a traumatic birth right
Mm.
off the bat. So she
Oh.
was actually a twin. Her twin sister, whose name was Brenna, was stillborn, and
Mm.
my daughter Katie was dying. So I had to have an emergency C-section,
Mm.
and we almost lost Katie. So she started life with separation anxiety
Oh.
immediately and with trauma. And then the more I've read through the years about traumatic births and stuff, very interesting. I actually just read a short article this week that says that sometimes traumatic births, that person could be on the spectrum eventually,
Mm.
or like born early or whatever. So they were 6 weeks early, which
Mm.
isn't huge, but she was also dying
Yeah.
in utero. My daughter was. Again, I lost one, and then my daughter Katie was dying in utero. So she had a very traumatic birth. I didn't get to hold her for 3 days because they had to take her to the NICU downtown where, and I'm about 45 minutes from where that is. So she started off even with separation anxiety from her sister, from me, from the day that kid was born. When she was just tiny, if she wasn't touching me, she'd scream.
Oh man.
It was quite, it was actually, now that I look back, it wasn't so funny back then, but now it's like fascinating as I look back. So she was always very shy and of course had that separation anxiety in particular with me. And then she started school. And I remember she always just wanted to have like one friend. She could never be, she could be in a group. I shouldn't say that, but she was not comfortable with a group. She felt left out. She worked too hard to whatever, So she would latch on to one friend. And God help you if that friend went to go with somebody else or my daughter would have a meltdown. And I never understood, I was like, I'm like, why is she having this meltdown? Why is she, now I look back, I'm like, I want to say it's the separation, anxiety. She just kind of wanted to have just that one person. So, when she started school, I remember when she started kindergarten, again, very shy kid. And her teacher would tell me, every time we have to go out of the classroom, like go to gym class or art class, she goes, Katie has to go to the bathroom. She goes, but I don't think she's going because I can see her shoes right by the door. Like she just goes in. So, I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. I wonder why she's doing that. I had no idea. I look back and I'm like, oh, she was trying to get herself ready to go into another transition. That's what she was doing. She was kind of getting herself, she was trying to get some courage up, whatever she was needing to do to move from this scenario where maybe she was a little comfortable. Now she has to go, to art class. And even though she's really artistic, she's very creative, she may love art class. It was very hard for her to go from, whatever they were doing in that kindergarten class to go out in that hallway, walk down the hallway and go into art class.
Oh man.
And then to leave art class, walk back down the hallway and come into her regular classroom. Again, at the time, none of us had any idea why she was doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when she turned about 10 years old, one day I went to walk out the door with her to go to my mom's house, and she loves my mom. They're very tight, and she wouldn't go. And she wouldn't leave my house. Like it felt like it happened overnight. And I'm like, what is wrong? And I'm like getting frustrated. I'm about to get angry because we're supposed to be somewhere. And she couldn't tell me. She didn't know. She just goes, I'm afraid I can't go out. I can't go out. And then this was happening for school every morning. I actually had to leave my job. I had a part-time job. I had to leave my part-time job because I didn't know if I was going to be able to get her into school. And again, I just thought it was separation anxiety. I just thought it was this anxiety for some reason. But I had all these thoughts because it did seem like it was just like this so quickly. And I was like, why? Okay, is somebody bullying her? Has somebody touched her who shouldn't have been touching her? Like I got all these thoughts in my head. Yeah. And things like that. So unfortunately, the principal of that school at that time, again, not to her fault because she didn't know, but the thing she was trying to do to get my daughter into school made everything worse. Like one time she actually picked her up to carry her in, and my daughter's kicking. And at that age, my daughter was already almost as tall as me. She's a tall girl now. And things like that. And, then that just imprinted in her, that horrible experience. So found her a counselor who was absolutely phenomenal. And she goes, I have never seen anxiety so bad in a kid this young.
Oh.
She goes, I do recommend medicine because I'm like the type of person, I have to be almost dying to take Tylenol. I just,
Yeah.
and it's not that I'm against medicine, but I'm like, what? I'm like, what are you telling me? So the counseling was wonderful. Again, she was diagnosed with anxiety. And then, of course, that cycle of depression, OCD, right? All three of those things with my daughter. Well, it was so bad at school for her. And again, we're talking elementary school at this time. We had to pull her out at the beginning of 5th grade, and we homeschooled her because she just could not get into school. The teachers and the principal didn't understand. I didn't understand. And we were all making everything worse for her. I didn't know it at the time, but her counselor said, you better pull her out of school. Her mental health is more important. She's an intelligent girl. She's, you don't have to worry about academics. Her mental health is more important. So we did that. So again, that was the beginning of 5th grade. 6th grade, we put her into a public school here where we live. And she still had anxiety and things like that. She was bullied pretty well. I did typically by one girl, and I let her know what she needed to do to have that girl stop bullying her. And finally, my daughter listened to me, and the bullying stopped.
Oh yeah.
But she still just struggled, had a hard time making friends. And again, for people to look at her, she's intelligent, she's beautiful, she's funny, she's sociable when she's in her element. She's athletic. It was like one of those. It's like she had everything, and it was hard to figure out why she couldn't make friends. And now why is she getting bullied? Things like that. And then she ended up 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. Now we come into high school as a freshman. My daughter is a phenomenal volleyball player, absolutely phenomenal volleyball player. So she was the setter on the varsity team as a freshman. And she was so horribly bullied in that school because she would do, when she was anxious, she would do her rocking, right?
Yeah.
Self-stim. Now, I didn't know what all this meant. I just knew, it's like I figure when you hold a baby and you rock it, it kind of feels, baby, and then you calm yourself. So I'm like, okay, she's rocking to calm herself. But when she did that, she was called a freak. She was called it. You name it, that's what they called her in the school. Another principal who I had to have words with, he was horrible. I had to have words with him and things like that. So we had to unfortunately pull her out of school in the middle of 9th grade. And because she was self-harming, hanging out with people she should never have been hanging out with, and things like that. The group that she found to fit in with was really not a group she should have been hanging out with. So, but again, I still see a lot of those kids now as grown-ups. They weren't terrible people, right? They were just making their way through high school as well. So we ended up pulling her out. She ended up getting her GED. She never went back to school into a brick and mortar building, or anything like that. She was on medication with the diagnosis of anxiety. And I think she was on, by the time she weaned her own self off, I think about 5 different medications, and none worked. Now I'm thinking, because it wasn't anxiety, she's on the spectrum. But again, nobody knew at this time. So she ended up, I forget how old she was, Keegan, but I didn't know she was doing this. She weaned herself off her medication for anxiety. At that time, she was on 3 of them at the same time. And they made everything worse. She just got worse and worse and worse. So she weaned herself off. And when she finally told me, I was like, that's fine with me. You know, I said it wasn't helping anyway, unfortunately, and things like that. So, you know, here we are in our teenage years and things like that. She's still going out with people that I would have preferred her not to be hanging out with, and things like that. And then she ended up getting sexually assaulted. And I didn't know for about a year and a half.
Oh, no.
And I remember when she came home that night, it was like a totally different person. I had no idea who this was. Like, it was, I thought, okay, she doesn't smell like alcohol. Again, alcoholism runs in my family. So I'm like, you know, was she doing drugs at the party? Like, all this stuff going through my head. It never, ever occurred to me that somebody raped her at that party. I don't know why, it just never occurred to me. So I'm like in her room looking to see if I can find stuff. I'm doing everything. She's still self-harming. She's writing stuff all over her body, calling herself a freak, a nut, it. She had all this stuff going on. And I'm telling, if you saw my daughter, nobody would believe it. I mean, you just wouldn't believe it to see her. And so, yeah, I didn't know for about a year and a half that she had been raped at a party she was at. And then at 16, she got pregnant with my amazing, beautiful granddaughter, who is the love of my life. I love this kid so much. So now we have my 27-year-old daughter, who I still think is but diagnosed with anxiety, depression, OCD. Hanging out with the wrong people. And believe it or not, she's never had a drink of alcohol in her life.
Oh, wow.
Thank God. And my ex-husband, he's actually been sober, I think, for about 31 years now. Oh, so from the time she was little, we always taught her about addiction and how she's probably at high risk for anything, because it runs on both sides of our family. Okay, my dad was an alcoholic, an abusive alcoholic. And they were saying depression still, teenage mom. And my granddaughter's dad, who is a wonderful father now, you know, he was a teenager too. So now we have these two teenagers who are teenagers doing teenage stuff. So, you know, I'm left kind of to start raising this beautiful baby and things like that, which was fine. But with that said, so then she ended up dating somebody else. And I knew immediately, Keegan, that this was not going to be good. So they dated, and he ended up sexually assaulting her more than once. And I didn't know it again for over a year after it happened. So with that said, you know, now you figure she's been sexually assaulted more than once. She's still diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and OCD. Okay, we're still not to the spectrum thing yet, right?
Yeah.
So, we're just dealing with a gamut of stuff like this. And I am, with the sexual assault that happened to her, she looked at me and she goes, "Mom, please don't go after him." Because I have 3 brothers. I'm just like, I'm more like my brothers, not like, oh, you know, whatever. And so now we add this to the plate now, right? Anxiety, depression, OCD. My daughter feels she's unworthy. The only thing she's good for is to be with guys, unfortunately, and all this other stuff. And so got rid of that guy. Thank goodness. Our relationship was terrible during this time. It was terrible. And I was focused on raising the granddaughter, to be quite honest with you. Her name's Annabelle. She became my priority because she had to, you know, somebody had to take care of this little kid. So anyway, kind of, you know, moving forward then. So that was around 19, 20 years old. Again, she's 27 right now. And we still you know, she didn't have her license yet, a driver's license. I think she got her driver's license maybe at about 23, 24 years old. And I couldn't figure out why either. I'm like, everybody wants their flipping license. I'm tired of driving you everywhere. You know, I mean, I have a lot on my plate now. I had to go back to work full time to help make ends meet with an extra mouth to feed. I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff. So with this said, like, she finally got her license. Again, at this time, I still don't know why it took her so long to get her license. I just kept chalking it up to the anxiety and the depression and all this other stuff. And then she finally got her license, which was awesome. She got her first and really only job. It was with the company I was with at that time. And she did great. It was wonderful, gave her something to do. And then unfortunately she got laid off about this time last year. But we would talk and I would be like, you're so intelligent, Katie. And she is, and she's very creative. I said, there's so many online things you could do now, right? Look at all the online things we can do now. Because I knew being out in public probably wasn't going to be her gig because of her anxiety in that. And she's like, oh, I have this dream, and this dream. She goes, but she just could never follow through with anything. And she would take in as much information as she could. She can't take in enough information, yet. I'm like, well, what are we doing with all the information? Information's lovely, but if we don't do anything with it, now this is my way of thinking, right? The neurotypical brain, then what's the point? If I'm taking in all this information, I'm not doing anything with it, what's the point? Well, we come to find out this past year, she just herself, because she is intelligent and she loves a lot of information, she started doing a lot of research herself. And she's like, Mom, she goes, I'm going to send you something. And it's about she goes, I think I'm neurodivergent. And I'm like, not even sure what that means. I figured it out just from neuro and divergent, things like that. I was able to kind of figure it out a little bit.
Yeah.
And she goes, well, I think I'm on the autistic spectrum. And the funny thing is, when I was in college and right out of college, I worked with people with autism, but these were, pretty severe kiddos with autism, and things like that. So I'm like, what are you talking about? Because that's all I knew were the kids that I worked with who, would most of them would not ever be able to live on their own, and things like that. So I was like, what are you talking about? No, all this other stuff, maybe a little denial on Mom's part. I don't know. So she kept sending me things and I was looking at like the checklists and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's Katie. That's Katie. That's Katie. That's Katie. And then I could go back and look through the years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that would have been a red flag. That would have been a red flag. That's Katie. That's Katie. So here we are in 2024, and we don't have a medical diagnosis of being on the autistic spectrum. Quite honestly, I don't think I need it. And Katie she won't get a true medical diagnosis with it anyway, which is fine. But now, again, we find out she's neurodivergent, she's on the spectrum, and now it's like, now what? Now what? I have looked and looked to see how I could be a support for her. And things like that. And I have yet to find anything, to be honest with you. And I know Katie researches a lot of things and she's on TikTok and stuff like that. And so she listens to other people on the spectrum and she'll send some of those to me, which I appreciate because it helps me understand her better. Right. And how she thinks and how her brain works. And she's very emotional. She's always been pretty immature emotionally. From the time she was a toddler. So I appreciate her sending me those things, but I'm like, but nobody's really saying, well, now what do you do? Like, here's an example. She's been driving. So this past summer, somebody almost hit her. So
Oh
she
no.
won't drive now.
Ew.
So I have to drive my granddaughter to school, bring her home. So here I am again with all of this on my plate, which is
Oh,
frustrating for me, and it's caused issues in my daughter in my relationship at times. So there's just the people she listens to will explain this is how I feel or how this affects me, but there's still no, okay, but now what do I do? Like, I'm like, how do I get my daughter to drive again? How do I, or help her or support her, whatever you want to say. And, she hasn't been able to have a job.
yeah.
She gets overwhelmed. How do I support her the best I can financially? It's difficult, So that's right now a little bit where we are with all of that. And she has done counseling as a young adult, but that was mainly for the sexual assault and some separation anxiety. Her best friend overdosed, heroin overdose. So she's lost a couple friends too, all to like overdoses. So, she's had a lot of loss, a lot of hurt. And right now she has a lot of anger and resentment that she is trying to navigate through. And again, I've been looking for people for me to find support for myself, and for Katie and things like that. I've had to learn to set boundaries for myself with her. And having to just kind of like trial and error, kind of know when to pull her in and when to hold her and when to call BS, and that just kind of goes back, Keegan, to like the stereotype, because people think that she's using me as a doormat. And don't get me wrong, I know I've enabled her at times through her life. I'm not going to deny that I have. But at the same time, people have been like, well, she's like sometimes a conniving, little bee, little brat. She's manipulative. She's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sometimes she is. However, let's think about it this way. Why? Why does she try to manipulate? Let's not just call her names. We have to, what's that underlying reason as to why she's behaving like this?
Yeah.
So this includes my family. It's very difficult to get them to see that most of it, she's not manipulating. She's not conniving. It's just how her brain is wired. And she's been through so much pain and trauma. She has PTSD. I have no doubt from everything she's been through. She wanted to kill herself. I don't know how many times, as a teenager, from everything she went through. So again, it's been a long journey. It's been frustrating, and it's frustrating for me still that especially my family won't. I want to say what you think, you don't trust me as her mom as to what I'm telling you, or, things like that. So, my heart just goes out to, anybody with any kind of mental health challenge, because I see as a mom, what goes on. I hear what people say. And I'm at a point where I don't keep my mouth shut anymore, because somebody needs to advocate for her, for my daughter. And I'm the only one basically who does it. But I'm not going to stop doing it. And sometimes, like I said, I'm wrong when it comes to how I handle things with her. But I'm learning. Too. You don't know until you try something, So, so that's kind of where we are right now. And she's had a really rough summer. And it stems from, honestly, her sexual assault and things like that. So she's been trying to deal with that. And again, even with that, Keegan, people just don't understand. And I tell them, I said, well, you can't unless it happened to you, first of all.
Yeah.
But you can be sympathetic, empathetic,
Mm.
kind, something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what I ask of people. I said, you know, it's that saying, we don't know what's going on in somebody else's house, you know?
Yep.
And so let's quit judging people, because we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. Yeah. And I'm just pretty much so frustrated that I'm not always, I don't know, lack for a better word, politically correct when I'm talking to people about this. I'm pretty much just like, bam, this is it.
Yeah.
You're not right. So, but that's just, I mean, that's just where my journey's taken me. And yeah, that's just the way it is. So, and you know, the more I've read about the late diagnosis with the women is like what you and I mentioned before, you know, we started recording is, you know, those young girls, you know, the society teaches, you know, young little girls to be, you know, those proper cute little girls sitting there, right? And so they're not acting out like the boys, because boys have all, you know, all that energy and all this other stuff. So the girls, nobody realizes that that's what they're doing. And when I would get her from school, she would get in the car and we get home and she'd have this meltdown and start crying, like in like kindergarten, first grade. And I'm just like, what in the heck is wrong? Because this isn't my girl. And her counselor told me, she said, Denise, she tries to stay so perfect every minute in school. She's so afraid to get in trouble. She's so afraid to break a rule. She's so afraid of what somebody's going to say to her that she holds all of that in. And then when she gets home, it just all comes out. No. And I was like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the other thing the counselor told me, even though, again, we were talking about just anxiety, depression, CD at that time, when I kept telling her, I said, I just don't get this. And I'm just like, just do it. Because that's me. I'm like, just do it. Just get it done. Yeah. And my counselor her counselor looked at me and she said, Denise, do you think she wants to be like this? And it was like, again, that light bulb, Keegan. I was like, my gosh, no, why would she? She's miserable. So that's what I say to people when they're questioning my daughter, you know, to me, or questioning my parenting of my daughter. And I'll be like, do you think, like, they're like, well, she doesn't do anything, must be nice. She lays around all day. She doesn't even have a job. And I'm like, do you think she wants to be like this? Because you can see she's not happy. Who wants to be unhappy their whole life, every minute of the day? I don't think anybody goals for that. That's not our goal, our dream. No. So just those couple things that counselor at that time told me really have helped me even today now. You know, talking to my daughter and trying to figure out how to help her navigate, try to help myself navigate through this whole thing. So that's kind of my journey with her right now.
Okay.
At this time.
Man, that is a very big journey. It is very crazy. Hang on, let me do this real quick so I can actually hear talk. That's a huge journey. There's a lot that goes on in there. Everything that went on from being in kindergarten and going to the bathroom just to wait around in between sessions and stuff. That as soon as you said that, that was kind of like, okay, yeah, there's something going on. Because for a child to mentally prepare themselves in such a manner, it's kind of like, wow, like that is some midlife crisis level stuff. And it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense in the moment. But like you said, looking back at it, there's a lot. And I can only imagine what kind of stress I would have put myself through if I were in your shoes. So it can't be easy. And I'm so glad that you're actually here and supporting and advocating for your daughter and for people that are like her, because that includes so many people that we'll never know because they either don't seek help, they don't admit it, or they just will deny it until they die. And then you have other people that don't suffer from all this, and like you said, they're kind of judging, bullying, and discriminating, and it's not right because yeah, we may look normal, but that's the thing is that, like you said, you never know what's going on in someone's house, and that also goes on with someone's head.
Yeah,
So,
I was sharing actually with my mom because
it
my
does.
mom has a real hard time, and again, I mean, my mom is open minded, but it's still, different generation. My mom's 87 years old. My mom was a single mom and
Mm,
that abusive. My dad was
yeah.
abusive to her. And then, she raised four of us basically
Mm-hmm.
on her own, working two jobs and stuff. She didn't really have time to be dramatic about, she was just putting food on the table for us. But so she has had a hard time
Yeah.
understanding because, she's like, pull, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps type of person, because that's what she did. But she was able to do that. That's how she
Mm,
raised us, but we're all able to do that because we have the neurotypical brain. So I had
mm,
to keep telling my mom, I was like, listen mom, her brain doesn't work like mine does, mom, like yours does. And it was one of
mm,
those where I had to tell her, I said, she doesn't want to be like this, mom. She wishes she didn't have to be like
mm,
this. And I told my mom, I said, I'll give you a very easy example, mom. When Katie has to take a shower, okay, I
mm,
looked at my mom. I said, what do? When it's time you want to go take your shower? She goes, well, I go in the bathroom, I get undressed,
mm,
the water runs, take my shower, do my thing, dry off, put my clothes on. I said, Katie is already
uh,
overwhelmed before she gets in the shower because she knows that now
mm,
she has really long hair and she has very curly hair. She knows that the
mm,
dripping of the hair down her back is going to drive her crazy. She cannot stand that feeling, mom. It drives her
mm,
crazy. If the water hits her in a way that
mm,
isn't appealing to her, that bothers her. And I said, and
mm,
then she has to dry her
yeah.
hair. And again, curly hair, it's almost down to her butt. It takes her
Mm,
almost an hour to dry her hair. By that
mm,
time, she's exhausted. But I told my mom, I said, Katie already is tired here in her mind with her thinking
mm,
before she even
mm,
does something simple like get in the shower. And when I explained that to my mom
yeah.
in that way, my mom still can't truly understand it. Again, if you don't feel that, how do you understand it? However, I told her,
Mm,
I said, something as simple as a shower, mom. I said, so now we're getting on Katie and trying to pressure her to drive a car. I said, I don't want her driving a car if she's not comfortable
mm,
driving. She's going to hurt somebody. She's going to hurt herself. She's going to hurt her child. Hold down a
mm,
job.
mm,
I said, the job
yeah.
she had when she was working with the company I was working with, it was remote. Um, it was a lot of information
Mm,
she got to take in, which she thrives on. It was for me what I would
mm,
call tedious work, but that's how her brain is. She just bam, 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 give her
mm,
information and she'll get it into you as quickly as possible. So I try to explain
uh,
to my mom and other people, I'm like, she can't just go out and get any job like some of us can, right? I can go
mm,
out and try any job.
yeah.
She can't do that. She really can't. And it
Mm,
took me, Keegan, it really was hard
yeah.
for me. At one time, I finally said to myself, right now, she's not capable. And that was hard for me to say because I would never want to say that about
Mm,
my daughter
yeah.
because I've always told her, you're more than capable of
Mm,
anything you put your mind to, which I still believe. But right now, she's not capable of driving. She's just not. And I'm not going to risk
mm,
that. I'm not going to push her.
yeah.
I'm not going to do any of that, or make her belittle her or make her feel bad
Mm,
about it because she already feels bad enough. I tell people, I said, she beats herself up more than anybody ever will.
mm.
I said, why am I going to add to that?
Oh, yeah.
Why are you going to add to that? I said, you don't see her sitting over, I point because she lives
Mm-hmm.
across the driveway. You don't see her over there crying, wishing she wasn't like this.
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes I feel like I want to videotape her, but I don't want to do that to her, and then show people and just say, this is what it looks like when she's in an autistic meltdown. She's smacking her head against the wall. She's hitting
Mm-hmm.
herself so hard she's bruised. And I'm going to tell you, just, again, other people that really need to learn about this are people in the medical field. We have had horrible experiences in the emergency room. And that was with me kind of prepping the doctor as to how Katie is. And and it's still like they threaten. They're like, if you don't settle down, I'm calling the ambulance, you're going to the psychiatric hospital. And I'm just like, what? And I have pulled more than one doctor out of a room out in the hallway. And I said, listen, you and I are having a talk right now. If you ever say that to her again, you're going to have problems with me. I was like, so even, I think that's a big area now that I'm talking about it, like the medical field and things like that. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, these poor people, she's in a total autistic meltdown. She has been sexually assaulted. Now you have people coming in, poking and prodding in places you don't want to be poked and prodded. And she's taking in the lights. She's taking in the smell. She's taking in the noises, people in and out of her room. The touch of the sheets on the bed drive her crazy because she has sensitivities as to how things feel for her. So she has all this overstimulation going on, and then, they'll walk in the room and go, if you don't settle down, you need to go to psychiatry. And I'm like, no, that's not what she's here for. And I have to I get very bold. Now I have no problem. The last doctor, I kind of took him by his shirt and kind of pushed him out in the hallway. And I said, you and I have to have another conversation, because apparently you forgot the first one we had, because he threatened her. He got like right in her face because she was having an autistic meltdown and she was hitting herself like this really hard. And he got in her face, a man. She's been raped. Now she has a man in her face hovering over her, threatening her that she's going to the psychiatric hospital. And I took the back of his shirt, I pulled him away. I opened the door and I kind of went like this out in the hallway. I said, you and I have to have a talk again. I said, because if people keep doing this, how am I ever, if she has another whatever's happening, how am I supposed to ever get her back in a hospital? How am I ever supposed to get her to a doctor if we can't trust you guys? So I would really love someday to see the medical field, dentists, anybody like that, really try to understand how to help these people. And with that scenario I just gave you, the emergency room we were in also has a pediatric emergency room. So they have the adults in the pediatric emergency room. And this doctor came up with a brilliant idea. He goes, you know what? We have fidget toys in the pediatric emergency room. Do you think those would help your daughter? I said, gosh, yes, go bring those fidget toys in here. And guess what? That calmed her down. Fidget toys. So again, I'm hoping that that physician at that emergency room remembers that for the next person that comes in, instead of threatening them, who's possibly on the spectrum. So again, it's frustrating because my daughter's been treated horribly more often than not with medical things in the medical field, the doctors and nurses and everybody. And again, I get it. You don't know, but gosh darn it, you're in the medical field. You better start learning about it.
Or at least have better bedside manners.
So, I forgot I wanted to get that medical thing in there too, because I really, if there's people out there, let me tell you, something has to change.
Yep. And that is where it needs to also start too, because that's where everyone's listening for the news on how to deal with it. So it's kind of one of those things like, they research it or make studies for it, and then you put it into real world applications, see how well it does, and then people kind of experiment from there. And with, again, maybe it works for some people, maybe it doesn't. And that's one of those things. A lot of internet sub communities and stuff have started popping up all over the place, trying to help out all sorts of people. And that's one of the resources that might help. Like, I don't know if you know Reddit, um, but they have it's called REDDIT. Let me make sure I'm spelling it right because, yeah, REDDIT, Reddit. And they have sub communities for basically anything and everything you can think of. So once you're in the search bar, you'll just look up, say, autism or neurodivergence, and you can find a whole bunch of different things. And maybe someone has some ideas or some little tricks and tips that work, and maybe some that might help Katie pass on to someone else. So that's just one of those things that it really does come down to a community effort. It does start from within and then it spreads from the outside. So I think it's awesome that you're here, you're trying to spread support and advocacy for your daughter and for all those people, because they need it, we need it. And that medical field thing is a huge one. It really is. And uh I just gotta say, it does take a lot of bravery to do this too. So I gotta
I
say
tell
thank
you,
you.
here's just a real short story because it's with the medical field again.
Uh-huh.
It was during COVID, and
Okay.
and also my daughter has a lot of physical issues,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I know some of that can be because of the autistic part
Uh-huh.
of her and things like that. So she has been in the emergency room quite a bit. But
Mm-hmm.
during COVID, I had to, take her there, and I couldn't go in, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And of course, she's an adult, so if she were a little kid, I probably would have been able to go in, but I couldn't go in. So I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting for her, and she's texting me from the room,
Mm-hmm.
and she's crying, and she's so upset because
Mm-hmm.
the doctor came in, and she's like, well, and my daughter had been throwing up nonstop for about 3 days.
Oh.
When I say nonstop, I mean like every 15 minutes,
Oh boy.
and things like that. So obviously, very dehydrated, potassium's dropping to dangerous
Mm-hmm.
levels and stuff like that. And this, young doctor looks at her and she goes, well, I just don't understand why you're in here. Maybe you should go
Oh
see a
boy.
psychiatrist. And I'm
Mm.
like out in my car. I'm like, I just want to bust through the doors. Because I kept telling her, I said, well, at the time though, we didn't know though she's on the spectrum either, because again, we just
Mm-hmm.
figured this out. But I'm just thinking to myself, because she was having a little bit of a meltdown. But I'm going to tell you, I was so
Mm-hmm.
proud of her because for the most part, she held her own, and she
Yeah.
was polite. She said, because I told her, I said, you didn't yell or swear, did you? Because that's not going to help. She goes, no,
Yeah.
mom. Things like that. So again, I mean, every time Keegan, she's been in the emergency room,
Mm.
or any other doctor, it
Mm-hmm.
has not. It's not turned out well. They just threaten, and that's
Mm-hmm.
extremely frustrating.
Yeah. That is extremely frustrating, and I do think that there needs to be some medical reform for sure. Uh, but I think it might go all the way back to the insurance and big pharma, and unfortunately, they got big money and deep wallets. I do not. Otherwise, this would not be an issue. I would hope, but it does raise some questions of what can we do in the medical field, what can we do in the medical community, what can we do as parents, as friends, teachers, brothers, sisters, so on and so forth. What can we do as general people for other people that have a neurodivergent brain, or just maybe are having a bad day? Like, what can we do as a society? And I think that's one of the things that this show is going to be great to explore. Uh, And so, if you've listened to some of the episodes previously, you know that I will want to have everyone back on the show. So, can I say, let's look at about a few months, see what kind of kicks on up, because we all know that everything can literally change in one day. So 6 months brings a ton of experience, new stories, and maybe we both have some tips and tricks for each other uh, in the next round. But I'm trying to think. You have just you're very brave for doing this. You got a lot of strength. And if Katie has even 10% of any of that you do,
She
I
does.
know that she's awesome. And so I can.
I tell her, I said,
That's
Sweet
good.
Pea, I
And-
said, you are so strong, you don't even know it. Everything you have been through, you're extremely
Mhm.
strong. She doesn't believe it, but she will
Mhm.
someday.
No, no, she
Yeah.
is. Oh yeah, she'll believe it. It may take a little bit of
Yeah.
looking back and some healing and stuff, but
Oh, yeah.
one day she'll get
Absolutely.
it. I mean, I've been there with the self harm and suicidal ideations and stuff, and so I can say there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not necessarily on fire. But um, speaking of self harm and stuff, do you know what the suicide hotline number is? Okay. The suicide hotline number is 988. So if we can teach our friends and loved ones how to dial 911, why not teach our friends and loved ones how to dial 988 in case of crisis or suicidal tendencies? So, um, but I am excited to see you back on the show because I can only imagine how much everything has changed, and I'm excited because it sounds like y'all are making strides in the right direction, and I can't wait to see what all the future brings. I do hate that we don't have more time,
Oh, I'm
but
looking
I
forward
can't
to
wait
it
to get you back
very
on.
much.
So,
And I'm hoping to offer more
awesome.
help or tips. And I'm hoping to get some from you too,
Oh,
Keegan. Helping each other.
of course. And don't forget, a lot of this is trying to get stuff out there and heard, because that is one of the biggest ways to healing, is to be heard and understood. And as a parent, that is a whole perspective that a lot of people don't have, and I don't really have a whole lot on my show. And so your experience is very valuable. It's unique, no matter what. And tell you what, uh, by next episode, I'll have tried to compile a list of things to try, um, for doctor's appointments, hospital visits, maybe some other resources that I find along the way. But yeah, and any of those that I find, I'll also include in the episode link with this, so that anyone else can find those as well for their loved ones. So, um, but stick around for just a little bit, and
Okay.
thank you very much
Sounds
for
good.
listening to Retrieving Sanity on WDJY 99.1 FM. Until next time, y'all have a good one. Shalom. All right, and stop.